Hello, I'm Liz Watson, and welcome back to Voices of the Great War. So today we are going to be concluding our letters from the Eckert family. And the first letter that I have in our conclusion is from Odo's mother, and it was written to Odo on February 24th, 1919. And this is a picture of that letter. And Odo's mother, she writes, "Dear Odo, received your letter this morning, also your pictures, which are good. Odo, the cable was sent before we received any mail from you after the armistice was signed. You might know how Papa and I were worried after hearing of Carl's death, and then no word from you. Thank God all is well, and take good care of yourself so you can see us all very soon. Papa was at the yard today and bought 68 head of sheep and lambs, also 4 calves. I was up to Mount Washington yesterday to see Aunt Maggie. She is getting better. I also went to see Aunt Annie. I had supper at both houses, then I could not sleep until 3 o'clock this morning. I am glad that Dad keeps the kitchen nice and warm, although we have not had a very cold winter. Odo, Mr. McClintock is still around and his boys are both safe but still in France. Papa and Albert do all the work, so you know they are not getting much rest. We have a pair of fine pigs and we still have chickens growing. How are all the German people you are with? If they have a family, give them my regards. Odo, don't forget to send your pictures to your aunts, for they have been very good to us in our trials. Did you ever get a letter from B. Grader? She wrote to you, but never got an answer. When you get your check, let us know. We thought you would like to get some things for the German people you are with. Did you get a newspaper from home? Odo, Papa says, when you come home, you and he will go see the camp together. Albert has gone to a dance tonight after working hard all day until 9 o'clock this evening, when he drove the sheep home. Odo, I will close as it is late, hoping this letter finds you well. With love from all, Mother." So in Odo's mother's letter, we see things again. They're starting to get back to normal. We're discussing normal things. So we're talking about how Odo's family, obviously they do some farm work, as they went and bought some sheep and some lambs and some calves, and they're growing chickens. So it's nice, I'm sure, that for Odo to hear that news of home. So the next letter that we have was written by Odo's Aunt Catherine, and it was written to Odo, and this is that letter. And Aunt Catherine's letter is dated February 25th, 1919. And Aunt Catherine's letter to Odo reads, "Dear Odo, your letters dated January 9th and 19th were received here. The one from the 19th got here yesterday. Aunt Tanya will answer it as soon as she can. So in the meanwhile, I will write you, as it is about 3 or 4 weeks since I last wrote. Your pictures are very good and show that the climate and living over there agrees with you, as you seem much stouter. George said he was going to have his photo taken some time ago, but we have not received them yet. Perhaps he will bring them himself. We see in this morning's dispatch that you will be starting for home on the 15th of April by way of the Rhine and Holland. You should be then home sometime early in May. We all hope it will be true. This time you will see some of Holland too. George seems uncertain about leaving for home. He says it may be at any time or not before July. While we are all anxious to see you soon, just so you are safe and have a fine journey home. Meanwhile, I hope you will get some of those excursions up and down the Rhine, which will give you a chance of seeing some of the sights and cities along that river. Sometimes, or something which I always have longed to see. While I am not much of a traveler, I would like to see the old world with its customs and different languages. You are there for Christmas and New Year's, but most likely will not be there to catch the Easter rabbit, as Easter will be later this year. This is a very mild winter, as we hear the robins and other birds singing, and only had a few cold days with snow, maybe 2 or 3. It seems more like autumn than near spring. Only for the birds singing we are reminded that it is spring. Would not be surprised if we get a very stormy and angry March for the wind-up. Well, I must close now, as I haven't much more to write, as you do not seem to have any one of our acquaintance with you, so we can't say how was so-and-so. As is usual, I only hope that it does not become monotonous and that you have found some good friends there. Thank you for the pictures and hoping to see the original soon. It is the wish of your Aunt Catherine. So, Aunt Catherine, again, she's kind of talking about hoping that Odo is getting to see some of the sights while he is in Germany, and this especially since the family came from there. And hopefully Odo did get to see those things. Again, it's probably very different from anything he experienced here in America. So our next letter is from Odo. And this is Odo's letter. And Odo wrote this letter to his mother, and he wrote this letter March 13th, and we can see that it's from the U.S. Army of Occupation. That's stationary. So, Odo's letter to his mother reads, Dear Mother, I am back from school at Chittillen and found between 40 or 50 letters waiting for me. Some are real old and some are late ones. Our fellows are all talking about going home, and we are supposed to sail some early date in April, so I will not ask for a pass. I am glad that you received mail for me so that you know that I am okay. The man that took my picture placed my hand behind me, so don't worry, my hand is all right. We will review before General Pershing one of these days now. Well, I soon ought to be on my way home. I received all sorts of news in these letters, and there were 2 letters from Singer and 1 from the fellows at the corner. I did not receive any mail from Susel, but it still has a chance to arrive. That is all, so I will close with best wishes to all from Odo. P.S. March 18th, I did not have a chance to mail this letter as General Pershing was here to review us on Sunday, and we had quite a time getting prepared for his arrival. The whole division was on the field at one time, and it was quite a sight. We left Sing Sing for the parade ground about 10 o'clock, and we arrived at 10:30. We returned at 6:30 p.m., so you know we were pretty tired. He gave us a little speech and hoped we would all be back home soon. I was on guard from 1:30 March 17th to 1:30 today, March 18th, so this is the first chance I've had to get this letter off. I received several more letters from home yesterday. Goodbye, Odo. So from Odo's letter, we can see that he's starting to get, or he got a bunch of that mail that had taken quite a bit of time to catch up to him. And that's kind of what happened with the mail for the boys that were overseas. Sometimes it did take quite a bit of time for it to catch up. And sometimes, again, it took quite a bit of time for their letters home to arrive with their families. So in Odo's letter, he mentioned about his arm being tucked behind him in a photograph. So obviously one of the letters that he received, he had sent that photo home, and in those letters that he received back, maybe his mother or another family member expressed some concern about why he had his hand behind his back in the picture. So I do have that picture of Odo here. So this is that picture of Odo, and we can see he does have his hand and his arm tucked behind his back. So I would imagine that considering all the war wounds, and probably a lot of the boys were returning home, obviously some of them had lost limbs and that sort of thing. So it was probably, I do imagine, probably very concerning for Odo's mother and family to see that picture and think something happened to his arm. They, that might have been their very first thought, rather than it was just simply a pose done by the photographer. It might have been, oh gosh, what had happened to his arm when he was over there. They also spoke, or Odo also spoke in his letter about being reviewed by General Pershing. So General Pershing, so that's kind of a big deal, because General Pershing, he was the commander of the AEF. So he was the head honcho. I do have a picture of General Pershing I would like to show you. So this is an image of General Pershing. And we can see him. He's right here, this first gentleman, looking very distinguished. So that's General Pershing. So yes, it must have been quite an honor to stand before General Pershing, especially with all of the boys on the field. And he said what a sight it was, and I bet it surely was quite the sight. So we have one final letter, and this final letter is from Odo. And here's Odo's final letter, and it's actually just written on a postcard. In this letter, Odo wrote it to his mother, and it's dated March 30th, 1919, and he wrote this in Sinzig, Germany, where he was stationed. And it reads, "Dear Mother, I'm expecting to leave here in 2 or 3 days. We have all received our inoculation, had a little pain from it for 48 hours, but am over it now. Received 1 letter from home and 1 from Aunt Tanya, both of which prove former letters. Your loving son, Odo." So Odo, that was the final letter home. So he left shortly after that and was able to return home and safe and sound. I do have, so this is Odo's discharge. His discharge from the United States Army, honorable discharge. And it does speak of the battles that he took part in, and one of the engagements, one of them being, he was obviously involved in the Argonne Offensive. We had spoken about that, and one of the engagements that he was also very heavily involved in was the one with Hill 288. And so I'm going to read a little bit. I've got 3 more letters, but these are not actually from the Eckert family. They are from high-ranking military officials, and these are the citations that the Rainbow Division had received from these high-ranking officials for their involvement in different engagements. And so I want to read this first one. This one is dated from October 26, 1918. It was in France, and it was from Charles P. Summerall, Major General Commanding. And so this was to the Commanding General of the 42nd Division. And the subject of this is the service of 42nd Division with the 5th Army Corps. And it reads, "Upon the termination of the service of the 42nd Division with the 5th Army Corps, I desire to express my appreciation of the manner in which portions of the division have performed the missions assigned to them. In particular, I wish to commend the following units: the 84th Infantry Brigade. This brigade, under the command of Brigadier General Douglas MacArthur, has manifested the highest soldierly qualities and has rendered service of the greatest value during the present operations, with a dash, courage, and fighting spirit worthy of the best traditions of the American Army. This brigade carried by assault the strongly fortified Hill 288 on the Kriemhild Stalling, and unceasingly pressed its advance until it had captured the Tuileries Firm and the Bois de Chantillon, thus placing itself at least a kilometer beyond the enemy's strong line of resistance. During this advance, the enemy fought with unusual determination, with first-class division, and in many classes resorted to hand-to-hand fighting when our troops approached its rear. The conduct of this brigade has reflected honor upon the division, the Army, and the states from which the regiments came, the 67th FA Brigade. This brigade has remained continually in action since the entrance of the division into line, and by self-sacrificing devotion to duty and the high skill of its officers and men, it has contributed greatly to the success of all operations. Charles P. Summerall, Major General Commanding." So in that letter from Charles Summerall, he speaks of that engagement that Odo was involved in with Hill 288. And it even involved hand-to-hand combat. So in prior letters between Odo and his family had often said, you never write of what happened, Odo. You never wrote of what you did. And I imagine some of those, a lot of the boys, they didn't want to talk about what they did. They didn't want to talk about what they saw as far as the fighting went, because they knew, how could they talk about this sort of thing with people who had never experienced it? So they didn't speak of those things. A lot of them didn't. And at least Odo didn't in his letters. Whether or not he discussed it with his family once he returned home, I don't know. But we can understand probably why he didn't speak of it in his letters, because how could you? I mean, what are you going to say to a mother who's never seen her son fire a weapon at another person or engage in hand-to-hand combat with another person? I mean, what would he say? So I can understand why he didn't do that, and so that it was very difficult for those boys for a long time. So our next letter is actually from General Pershing, and this one, here's this letter from General Pershing. Again, citation written. And this letter reads, "It is with a sense of gratitude for its splendid accomplishment, which will live through all history, that I record in general orders a tribute to the victory of the First Army in the Meuse-Argonne battle. Tested and strengthened by the reduction of the Saint-Mihiel salient for more than 6 weeks, you battered against the pivot of the enemy line on the Western Front. It was a position of imposing natural strength, stretching on both sides of the Meuse River from the bitterly contested hills of Verdun to the almost impenetrable forest of the Argonne. A position moreover fortified by 4 years of labor designed to render it impregnable. A position held with the fullest resources of the enemy. That position you broke utterly and thereby hastened the collapse of the enemy's military power. Soldiers of all of the divisions engaged under the 1st, 3rd, and 5th American Corps and the 2nd Colonial and 17th French Corps, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 26th, 28th, 29th, 32nd, 33rd, 35th, 37th, 42nd, 77th, 78th, 79th, 80th, 81st, 82nd, 89th, 90th, and 91st American Divisions, the 18th and 26th French Divisions, and the 10th and 15th French Colonial Divisions, you will be long remembered for the stubborn persistence of your progress, your storming of obstinately defended machine gun nests, your penetration yard by yard of woods and ravines, your heroic resistance in the face of counterattacks supported by powerful artillery fire. For more than a month, from the initial attack of September 26th, you fought your way slowly through the Argonne, through the woods, and over the hills west of the Meuse. You slowly enlarged your hold on the Côte de Meuse to the east, and then, on the 1st of November, your attack forced the enemy into flight. Pressing his retreat, you cleared the entire left bank of the Meuse south of Sedan, and then stormed the heights on the right bank and drove him into the plain beyond. Soldiers of all Army Corps troops engaged. To you no less credit is due. Your steadfast adherence to duty and your dogged determination in the face of all obstacles made possible the heroic deeds cited above. The achievement of the First Army, which is scarcely to be equaled in American history, must remain a source of proud satisfaction to the troops who participated in the last campaign of the war. The American people will remember it as the realization of the hitherto potential strength of the American contribution toward the cause to which they had sworn allegiance. There can be no greater reward for a soldier or for a soldier's memory. This order will be read to all organizations at the first assembly formation after its receipt. John J. Pershing, General Commander-in-Chief, American Expeditionary Forces. So that must have been hearing that from the commander of the American Expeditionary Forces. I mean, listening to it, and reading it, it's an honorable letter. Just to know what all those divisions, they banded together and fought and made it through the Argonne, and they lost a considerable number of lives during that particular offensive, but they managed to come through it, and they succeeded. And because of that last offensive, the war was able to reach its end. So I do have one final letter in this one, or one final citation, and this one is also from General Pershing. And we had read in Odo's letter about the review that they were going to have by General Pershing, that he was going to come again and see the 42nd and see all the boys on the field. So I'm going to read this citation, and it's written to Major General Clement A.F. Flagler, commanding 42nd Division, American EF. So, my dear General Flagler, it afforded me great satisfaction to inspect the 42nd Division at Regiment on March 16th during my trip through the Third Army, and to extend at that time to the officers and men my appreciation of their splendid record while in France. The share which the 42nd Division has had in the success of our armies should arouse pride in its achievements among all ranks. Arriving as it did on November 1st, 1917, it was one of the first of our combat divisions to participate in active operations. After a period of training which lasted through the middle of February 1918, it entered the Luneville sector in Lorraine, and shortly afterwards took up a position in that part of the line near Baccarat. In July, it magnificently demonstrated its fighting ability in the Champagne-Marne defensive, at which time units from the 42nd Division aided the French in completely repulsing the German attack. Following this, on July 25th, the division relieved the 28th in the Marne offensive, and in the course of their action, they captured the Croix Rouge, Ferme, Surgay, and established themselves on the northern side of the Ourcq. In the St. Mihiel offensive, the division made a rapid advance of 19 kilometers, capturing even villages later during the Meuse-Argonne battle. It was twice put in the line, first under the 5th Corps and second under the 1st Corps, at which later time it drove back the enemy until it arrived opposite Sedan on November 7th. Since the signing of the armistice, the 42nd Division has had the honor of being one of those composing the Army of Occupation, and I have only words of praise for their splendid conduct and demeanor during this time. I want each man to realize the part he has played in bringing glory to the American Army, and to understand both my pride and the pride of their fellows throughout the American Expeditionary Forces in their record. My good wishes accompany your command on its return to the United States, and my interest will remain with its members in their future careers. Sincerely yours, John J. Pershing. And Odo kept all of those citations, and there are more from different other engagements that are in that packet. But I just wanted to read those because I thought that those were, they seemed to be the most significant out of the packet. But it must have been, again, an honor to see General Pershing there on that field and hear those words that he spoke of gratitude for all that the men had done during their time in France. And the 42nd Division, where Odo hadn't made it over until well into 1918. But we can see that the 42nd Division, they were one of the first. They were over in 1917, and that towards the end of November, and that was very early on for the Americans, because they did not enter the war again until April of 1917, and they really were not able to send fighting troops over until much further into 1917, in November we see, because it took time to get the force together and to train the boys. Because prior to that, the army was not large in numbers, so we had to pull boys in via the draft, and many enlisted too, and we had to get them trained and get them ready to fight in this first global conflict that went on for 4.5 years, a very long time. So that is the conclusion of our letters from the Eckert family. And until next time, I am Liz Watson, and thank you for joining us on Voices of the Great War.